this computer. All right. Well, I'm excited today to have Anita Nielsen with me, the author of Beat the Bots, also an expert sales enabler, 20, 30-year veteran in the industry. Anita, we are so happy to have you. I'm excited to have you as one of the initial episodes.
Me too. Thank you so much. I'm super excited for your podcast, but I am honored to be one of your first guests. So I appreciate you reaching out.
Well, I'm excited to have you. Let's get right into it. And
Let's do it.
so I wanted to kind of start off with a situation. So if you were given the keys to a sales team right now, whether that be a local team or a region team or a national team, however you wanted to structure it, where would you start, or what are the top 3 areas you would focus on right now from a priority standpoint with a sales team, knowing what you know with your
Right.
history?
So, it's always hard to decide what those are. But the first thing I know, and I do this actually in my work sometimes, I would sit down with the sales team. So now if it's a sales team of 100, I probably won't be able to do that right away. So then in that case, I would pick and choose, the top performer, the bottom performer, the mid-range performer. But it's really important to me to start off with those interviews, almost more important than delving really deeply into the data. I need to figure out for those sales professionals, where's their heart? Where's their mind? Like what motivates them? What is standing in the way of their success? So get their perspective, because I'm going to need that before I start really digging into data, which would be part 2,
Okay.
is looking at the metrics, looking at the historical numbers, kind of seeing how they're just doing in general, that, different deal stage velocity, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to look at that. And it's always really interesting when you do that, because then you get a comparison between who the humans are and what they've said to you, and then what the data is saying. And it's interesting sometimes because it's not the same story. And so then the job becomes, okay, so what's the gap, right, between where they need to be and where they seem to be? And it's like any gap analysis. Now I'm going to sit down and figure out, these are the holes that I know we have that are impeding our success, and then build the enablement programs to help make those happen. So I think it's learn the people, learn the data, and then enable them.
Right. What's the of those top 3? Where do you think you would spend the most time? Where do you think you're going to spend the most time with a sales team up front?
Um, so where will I spend time with them
Yeah,
up front,
or
or
where do
which
you
one will
think you would
be?
spend the most in that process?
Yeah, so I mean, it's going to be one-on-ones, right? So I think the majority of the time that I'll spend, between those 3, the most time probably will be tied between the one-on-ones and then sitting down and actually doing that work of thinking through the enablement plan. But when
Okay.
it comes to meeting with those guys one-on-one, I mean, I like to have at least 45 minutes to an hour, because I'm a relationship person, and so for me, I'm more focused on the coaching and helping grow them. And if I don't know where they're starting, I can't do that. So that is uber important to me. And I'll tell you the honest truth, that's not necessarily what's super important to a lot of people who become sales leaders. I mean, they've been
Right.
tremendous super salespeople in the past, and that's not been an area of interest. So, but for me, I'm a little bit different in that that's critical to me to know that.
Okay, good. And you mentioned in the book that we've never really had, this is a great time, even though it's a complex time with technology, and which is really your background. And this is a great time to differentiate yourself and an opportunity to do that. So I kind of wanted to expound on that and kind of get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So the premise, and it's so funny, this timing, right? It's actually even amplified right now. But when I was writing the book, I got to the point where I was sick and tired of hearing things like robots are going to take B2B sales professionals' jobs. It was just like, no, they're not. Yeah, they'll take some of the jobs, the lower level, data driven, rote type activities, but
Right.
they won't take away those jobs where it's kind of the complex situation, and more detailed involvement around helping a customer make a buying decision. And I think that's the part that differentiates us, right? So in order to be able to beat the bots, as I say, you have to work and focus on the things that are the opposite of what the bots can do. And that's the humanity of it. That's
Right.
who you are, what you stand for, your ability to empathize with them, understand them, take on their plight as part of your destiny, right? Making sure that you're focused on that customer in a way that is genuine and human to human, because I believe the only place differentiation really even lives anymore is in the interaction, that human interaction and relationship between buyer and seller.
Right. Yeah, that human to human aspect is so crucial, especially in today's environment, like you're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm I'm talking with Anita Nielsen. She is the author of Beat the Bots. I've got the book right here. You need to get to Amazon. You need to run to wherever that book is sold and learn and really how your humanity can future proof your tech sales career. Although the book is written from a technology standpoint because her background is there, this is very transferable to all industries. So. Make sure you keep that in your mind when you're reading the book and transferring those skills. So, Anita, what inspired you to really to delve deep into the kind of the human approach to selling and staying relevant that way from a human standpoint?
It's funny because it was a human interaction that actually led me to that. So in addition to all this knowledge about data and B2B people, salespeople losing their jobs, and that was frustrating to me. But at one point I went out, I'm an embedded coach. So a lot of times I have the privilege of going out on sales calls with the people that I coach at different companies. And I'd gone out on one with one of my favorite, not that I play favorites, except I do, one of my favorite people. And we went through this call. It was good. It was nothing outstanding or exceptional or remarkable, but it went really well. And so we went out for a drink afterward just to debrief and for me to give him his coaching. And, a couple of drinks later, we're sitting here talking, and he starts going into the idea that, it's really hard to differentiate. I mean, I don't know if the competitors are saying the exact same thing. And if I don't do well at this, my commissions are already starting to dwindle. That's going to get worse. I'm not going to be able to send my kids to private school where they're at. I'm going to have to ask my wife to go back to work, and she hasn't worked in a decade. She's a teacher because we've been blessed enough to have her stay at home. So all these things I'm hearing, and I joke about it, but in my brain, my empathy sensor just goes wacko, like, oh no, this is not okay. And so at
Right.
that point, it was almost like the theory and the understanding of this challenge that's coming up about humans versus robots in sales. Now it became very human, right? So now
Right.
in my head is this person who's looking out at the future and thinking they're going to be obsolete and that their kids are going to have to change schools. And I was like, no, that's not happening. So that's where that's truly, I mean, there was a few stories, but that's the biggest one, I think, where I was like, gosh darn it, I'm going to have to write a book because I did not want to, I never set out to actually write a book, but that's the one that just made me say, got to do it.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. You mentioned you were an embedded sales coach and trainer. So you take all of that practical field experience that you had, and then they embed you into into the field. And I think we miss that uh, in the sales at the corporate level right now. Is we don't necessarily have that embedded coach. We have a manager, or they'll call them a sales manager, but I wouldn't say that they're a teacher and a coach. Maybe some organizations do it well, but for the most part. So one of the things I wanted to really talk about was how did your success in the field shape your current approach and how you work with clients?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think because two things. One, I was in the trenches myself for a while, right? So I already did
Right,
my stint in that. Two, as an embedded coach and listening to salespeople and doing deal doctors and things like that, I learn a lot and I stay very current on the types of challenges that are going on. And I think the reason that I'm able to be successful as a sales performance coach and trainer is that when I meet salespeople, they don't look at me as a trainer, right? They see someone who is looking out for them and someone who's been there, done that, and genuinely cares about them. And I think that makes all the difference in the world. And I have trench stories. So when I go in to talk and do training classes or even one on one coaching, I can give them concrete examples from real life from when either I was doing a large deal or when I was with another sales professional that was doing it. So the fact that it's very practical and it's very backed by trench knowledge, I think makes a big difference. Because here's one thing I know for sure: when companies sign up for like corporate trainers, there's a lot of great trainers out there, and it's a skill set in and of itself. But one thing I've learned over the years that if you get someone who's a really good trainer and you put them in front of a room of high performing or even mid performing salespeople, they will chew them up and spit them out because they will
right.
know that they've never held a bag and that they've never done this. And so their credibility is almost shot. So I think for me, what informs my approach is that I've done it. And then just the human to human piece of it, they learn very quickly that I genuinely care about them and want them to succeed.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. The example I like to use is, I can read about golf and I can watch videos about golf.
That's right.
But until you go out on the course and until you play and until you experience how to
Exactly.
score and how to play the game,
Exactly.
it really doesn't matter. So it's, with that practical experience and your ability to extrapolate those experiences
Yeah.
and have that knowledge is huge.
I love that. Okay, so I'm going to steal that analogy just FYI in the future because I'll take it a step further. Now, if you as the person who's done all your online, work and played Wii and whatever you've done to learn golf, now if you go to a master class and start trying to tell them how to play golf, you better leave and fast because they will be done with you very quickly. Because nobody's
Right.
got time. Salespeople don't have time for that nonsense. Like my rule is if I'm doing something with salespeople, if I'm spending time with them, if the minute if I don't give them at least 2 minutes of value for every 1 minute they would have spent in the field, I've failed. And that's that's a measure that I use for myself and in my surveys is I need to know that if I took a minute from you, you got at least a couple minutes back. Um, and it's important. That's so important to me because the most valuable thing that salespeople have is their time, and we have to be very conscientious as sales leaders to, put them in front of the customer as much as possible.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. One of the other things that you talk about in the book, really, you really kind of talk about this throughout the whole book and the differentiating process and how you do that from the human to human approach. But one of the things that I found fascinating was, and I believe this, I truly do, some of the ways that you differentiate yourself doesn't have to be with the actual product or service you sell. And you have some great examples in the book. I mean, one of them, I thought about it for a while. The doctor, I think it was, or the Northwestern, the kid at
Yeah.
Northwestern, you had
Yep.
one of your own about the candies, and then I think a nurse. But talk a little bit
Look
about
at
that because
you.
I
My
think that's
goodness. You read the book. I'm so excited.
yeah,
Thank you.
I think that's
Yeah,
huge
it is.
about being able to differentiate. And if you can actually do something that help your customer that doesn't actually relate to their process or what
That's
they
right.
do, the product, that's tremendously valuable.
Yeah, it's huge. And this is like, I mean, I know people are always like, oh, here she goes. She's getting on our soapbox. But I have the opportunity, so I'm going to do it. So
Yeah,
at a product level, we can't differentiate for the most part, right? Because once a product and an innovation happens, it's a minute before 100 companies sell it, right? And that inherent value of that product is not a way to differentiate. Then
right.
you've got your company. Well, your company may have some special things that it does for customers, and you may even have something that's different. But for a minute, until another company figures out that you're being successful with your obsessive customer support. Now they're going to do something called raving customer support. It's just, there's not differentiation at
Yeah,
that
they're going to
level.
one up you.
Yeah, exactly. And so where differentiation truly lives is is when a salesperson takes who they are and what they stand for and their knowledge of what a customer needs to succeed and brings it all together to make it really meaningful for that customer. And that doesn't necessarily just mean the product because a customer is playing a role. So in that role as a buyer, they have to make a decision and there's lots of information that they need about the product, et cetera, et cetera. But behind that role is a human being who's also maybe looking for promotion, maybe looking to go get a master's degree. There's things that are motivating them on a very fundamental human level. And the salespeople that are, I found the high performers, they're the ones that are very quickly able to get to those things. And then because they're thoughtful and because they care, they'll go figure out a way to solve those problems because honestly, the buying problems, if you've got a decent product and if you've got your information on the product, it's going to be bought, right? Like people will buy your product with the features and benefits. But if you want to be that person who wins against the competition, beats the bots, and has a customer for life, it has to be how did you move that human being? And I think that's so important.
Right. Robert Cialdini's book, Influence, in the book, and about how those concepts, reciprocity, authority, how important they are to sales. But when you look at sales training today, how much emphasis do you think is put on those soft skills versus just technical training?
Yeah, I love this question. And I think I probably would have had a different answer 5 years ago than I do now. I think we've made progress. I still think we're not where we need to be. I mean, if you look at like World Economic Forum, especially with all the technologies, AI, bots, these soft skills are becoming much more important. And they're the things that people are going to have to differentiate them in their jobs, not just with customers. So from a sales training standpoint, I think we have a tendency to train a lot on methodologies and on process and on the product,
Right.
and that's all great. It's really important. And it's readily trainable, right? Like it's not even something that you have to train face to face or necessarily do one-on-one coaching on. However, salespeople that have a basic understanding of psychological principles, they by and large end up being the ones that are the high performers. And some of them don't even know what these principles are, right? Like they haven't read Cialdini's book. It's just who they are. It's what they do. But we're blessed enough to have someone like, Robert Cialdini, who wrote this book. And for me, what was so important, because I know that a lot of salespeople don't necessarily make the time to read a book that's that much detail from a research standpoint.
Right.
So I was like, all right, let me break it down in a way that makes sense for my people and how they can use it in their day to day. But we fail them, honestly. We fail salespeople on a regular basis by not empowering them with the human to human skills that they need. Companies are getting better. I will acknowledge that. But man, especially right now with all this pandemic and isolation and all these things going on, humans are craving connection like never before. And
Yeah.
if people don't know how to create that, they're going to struggle.
Yeah. No, I agree. And that leads me into another topic that I think you just do a great job in the book with is discovery. And so we, when you look at the top sales performers that you've trained versus the ones that maybe weren't as good, and you really go into this into the book and discovery and how important it is. And I'll even say, I'm in the field, I sell right now. And I sometimes, I'm going to skimp on discovery. Sometimes I get too quick, but what separates those good sales performers in the discovery process from the rest?
I love this question. And so I'm pretty passionate about it too. So
Yeah.
I think salespeople, when we're out selling, we're really, I mean, at some point, we're really good at what we do. So we have a system. We're going to ask the right questions, we're going to get through it, and we're going to sell what we think that they need. A lot of times we go in with a preconceived notion based on initial call that we had with them. I say that that's you have to watch yourself. Don't become that person who's just got a rote process to ask questions. Be very deliberate and conscientious in terms of the questions you ask. And I advocate something called a high impact question.
Yes.
When we're in Sales 101, every one of us gets beaten into our brain. Do not ask closed-ended questions because you will only get a yes and no answer. I mean, that's basic. Sure, we forget a little bit in the field. And the idea is to go ask open-ended questions that'll get you more than a yes or no answer. I look at things that are a little bit even higher level than that. They're more around letting that customer just speak. So things that start with, can you describe? Or help me understand? Or what are your thoughts on? Because what happens with those is not only will you get the baseline information, but it's very hard for people when you ask them, what are your thoughts, for emotion not to seep in. And it's that emotion that what you're going to use ultimately as a sales professional to differentiate yourself. And so if you're not good at asking those questions that draw that emotion out, you're you're not doing yourself a service, because
Right.
that's where differentiation lives, is in that emotional motivation.
Yeah. And I think, of course, patience is another one of my things. I'm not really great at patience, but I think you've really got to develop that patience to be really good at discovery, because like you said, you go in and you just want to do a deal so fast, and you don't take that patience and do those types of the emotional piece of it that you're
That's
talking
it.
about.
I've got a good story for you on that one, real quick. So I do training with a lot of different salespeople, and typically it's sales leaders, right? VPs and SVPs of sales that bring me in. So I was in a class, maybe about 15, 20 people, and I'm talking about discovery. And I have this thing that I put up on the board. It's like a little quiz test to see what people do. And the gist of it is, what's the one question that you can ask to get an answer? And immediately the sales VP stands up and pops up and says, ask them if it's right. And of course, I'm just like, no, that's a yes or no. And the reality is, that's the VP of sales. That dude knows how to sell. But it's instinct at this point to be super effective and super quick and just get through it. Let's get to the sale. Let's get to the deal. I'm here to say, look bigger, look beyond that one sale you're in, look for
Right.
what you're not seeing, and then create that customer for life so that they care so much about what you did for them that they will never, it won't occur to them to buy from someone else, whether you stay at this company or you go to that company. They will find a way to have you help them.
And that's a great segue into this next question, because
Yeah.
the lifetime value of a customer is important. I mean, it's like when you go to the grocery store and you buy $200 a week or whatever over the lifetime, that's important. So wherever you
Right.
shop, they look at it that way. And I think as a professional sales, that's how we need to look at it. And you talk in the book about loyalty and how important that is, and kind of after the sale. So
Yeah.
let's talk about that, and some of the keys to creating that loyalty. And what do you see in the top performers that are real good at doing that?
Yeah, this one's another one that's really important. And again, timing, it's really, really important right now. So one of the things that I've seen, especially in transactional or technology sales or anything that really requires some sort of an onboarding and implementation, what happens is a salesperson will do, even the best salesperson will do a wonderful job asking questions, getting that buyer to make the favorable decision, having their best interest at heart. But then it comes, the ink starts to dry, right? And now it's time to hand that buyer off to the transition specialist or the implementation or client engagement manager, whatever you want to call that role, that's going to help that customer move into the delivery of the services or whatever the solution is.
Right.
What some salespeople will do, well, they'll set up like they'll send out an email. Hey, this is Mason, for example, and he's going to be your guy to help you get through transition, da 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 da. And that's fine, except for when you're a customer and you see that now your person that you've trusted so much and that has helped you make this decision, truly, if they did their job right, is handing you off to somebody who you don't even know at all. And oh my God, does this mean that they're not going to be there for me anymore? And I'll tell you what, in that first 30 to 60 days, a customer knows whether or not, or they make a subconscious decision whether or not they're going to buy from you again, or if they're going to renew, or what their loyalty level is. And so it is critical for that salesperson to use that transition piece and make it powerful. So for example, Mr. Customer, Mrs. Customer, I'd love, if when it's possible, I'd love to do a lunch with you and the implementation specialist, just so you can get to know them, and then have that lunch and be the salesperson who says all kinds of great things about what that implementation specialist done. Let the customer have the feeling that they're going to care for you just as much as I did. And then show the customer that you're telling that implementation specialist all the things that they need to know to help that customer be successful. So it's kind of a hands-on, hands-on. And then even after that, still keep your thumb on the pulse of what's going on. Because if
Right.
you want that customer for life, you don't get to disappear. You don't get to just move on and say next.
Right. Yeah, I think that is where, it separates the transactional.
That's right.
If I sign someone up to a truck lease and just or a truck transaction, they purchase it and then they never hear from me again, and
Mhm.
I don't do what you're talking about and lead them through that implementation process, it becomes very transactional, and that takes that human to human that you talk about in the book out of there, and
Yeah.
you
And you're
can't.
no different.
You're no different than
Like
everybody else.
an online portal, actually, if you have like online content, it could walk you through the implementation and onboarding, couldn't it?
Right.
So you could just sign up for a course and it'll tell you how to log in and do this and that and the other. But it's something a machine can do. And so if you
Right.
want to differentiate, you better be able to do more than what that machine can do for you, or the
Yeah.
customer rather.
Absolutely. I mean, that drives it home perfect. Automation, it could take care of that, like you said, if you let it, if you don't get that human to human touch in
Exactly.
there.
We need
um
it.
Authenticity, how have you seen, and I know you're a big fan of that, and in the book you talk about it being authentic, but how have you seen that translate into sales success, or how does that help the sales professional get that success?
I love this one because so authenticity, I once heard someone say it was about sincerity, which is very similar. Someone was saying, once you learn how to fake sincerity, you can do anything. I was kind of like, no, that's not a thing. You don't, no, you
Yeah.
just kind of shake your head and say, where did this come from? And
Yeah.
the truth is, we read a lot about authenticity. We read a lot about sincerity, but it is not something you can fake. You
Yeah.
cannot fake it. You have
It's
to
almost a buzzword now. It's getting
it
so popular.
100%. I mean, and I actually struggled putting it in the books. I was like, oh God,
Yeah.
I'm going to be one of those, but I couldn't find a better word. So you have to be real. You have to be who you are. And for salespeople, and this is my observation over years, that's sometimes really hard, right? Because what they feel makes them look good is that strength of knowledge and that ability to know all the answers and to have all the information. I'm here to say the true courage lies in being able to go in there and be a human being and let that customer know your story. Let them know where you came from and let them know why it's important for you that they purchased this. Be real. Now, disclaimer, don't be a dummy, right? Like,
Yeah.
don't go in there and be so real that you're going to be obnoxious.
Yeah.
Be real in as much as be genuine and show them who you are, because I'm telling you, they're not buying what you're selling. They're buying who you are. And
Yeah.
if you get that wrong, your chances are
Yeah.
down.
No, absolutely. So that's a good segue also into, so what do you see lacking in sales training? I mean, you do it every day, and you work with whether it's a small organization or a very
Yeah.
large organization or a local company. Um, what's lacking? And it may be different in each of those niches, but generally,
Yeah.
what's lacking in the sales training that you see?
Yeah, I think there's two things. So one, the content of the sales training isn't necessarily highly relevant to the audience. So there's some methodologies that are, one size fits all, and that's bull. There's no such thing as one size fits all when you're trying to sell. It's
Right.
just not a thing. And so they're not tailored enough to that audience. And that's a big problem because now you're trying to show some ideas that maybe worked in some other industry, but aren't necessarily going to work in this industry, much less with this particular team. So I think the ability to tailor it and customize it, the content to make it highly relevant, which, by the way, if it's not highly relevant, it's not going to stick. And so that takes me to my second issue with sales training is it's very easy for companies to go sign a contract and bring someone in to do a sales training. And they're like, here's what you need to learn today. Here's your notebook, here's your binder, and then bye. And
Yeah.
that's not going to work, because the whole reason that you get invited in as a trainer is because the sales manager, the sales leader, does not want to do that themselves. And they don't necessarily, it's not what they should be doing. So if you leave and you leave them to figure out how to reinforce it, then it's not going to stick. And so one of the things that I was very important to me when I started my training classes was it can't just be, I'm going to come out and do a training. It has to be three things. One, I get to come in and I get to do a discovery one day with the salespeople. And I have a little list of who's your most positive, who's your most negative, who's your highest performer, lowest performer, who's the
Right.
one that is a cheerleader. Like, I've got a very specific personality list of people that I need to have in there. And I build my relationship with those salespeople. So now, not only have they got to meet me and they get a better feeling for what I'm trying to do, they've probably not met a lot of trainers that are actually talking to them before the training. So that works well. And the ones that are negative, the peanut gallery isn't going to be chiming in now because they've already met me and they realize that, she's doing what she wants to do. So that's step one. Step two is deliver a really tailored class based on all these things you just learned. And then the third step is always, always, always build in a one-on-one coaching session for each of the attendees. Now, whether that is, one or two or three, the more, of course, the better, right? Because the more sessions that they have to really focus on them and how they apply the skills, the more it's going to stick. But at a minimum, they should have a 1 hour one-on-one with me where they get to at least tell me, hey, this was helpful to me. Hey, I didn't really get this. How do I use this? Or I have a deal that blah, 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 blah. Can you tell me? That 1 hour is so huge because now it's made them feel heard, and
Right.
it's made super relevant. It's made what I just taught them, boom, relevant to a deal they're doing that day or what their day-to-day sales motion is. So to me, that's the thing that's lacking. Sales training just can't be, a template that you go in and change some words and names and go present it over and over again.
Yeah.
And I'll
And I
tell you,
think,
I'll never be a gajillionaire because of it, because I refuse to do it. I refuse to have a 60-page template and go
right.
out. And that's why I went out on my own. But you have to, if you want it to matter and if you want to make a difference, that's what you have to do.
I think you're dead on. I think the training that I've even received over the years, or you do exactly what you said. You go to the annual event, or it's a once a year thing. You
Yes.
go through this program, you come back. It doesn't stick. I think the key is just exactly what you said. You have to have that one-on-one communication after the fact, which
That's
would
right.
be equivalent to following up in sales. You need that follow-up from the Anita Nielsens of the world that are taught, even if it could almost be a portal where they go back
That's
to and they
right.
can ask questions and they can talk to
Yes.
you and they can communicate that way for the next 6 months to a year. Because otherwise, I agree with you
They'll lose it.
100%. Yeah.
And the one thing I will say though, there are some sales leaders who are really good at their one-on-ones, and they have a nice structure. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's maybe that I empower the sales leader, so I might do my first session, but then I empower the sales leader on how they're going to do this going forward. And a lot of times, sales leaders want to know this. We
Yeah.
have sales leaders who really, really want to grow their leadership skills and their coaching skills, and that's a branch of my business that I didn't necessarily suspect was going to happen, but by and large, even when I leave a company from a sales professional standpoint, I continue on. I become retained to help that sales leader learn
Yeah.
those skills, and I love that. I respect that so much that they're willing to grow themselves to be the leader their team needs.
So you basically are the trainer. You train their sales managers to have those one-on-ones and
Yeah,
and
yeah,
to be able to have those and to train those high impact questions that you're talking about and to
yeah.
take their sales force through that. That's
Yeah, and
awesome.
I'll train the managers and stuff, but with the sales leader, it's a little bit different. It's more encompassing. It's more about, this is what that content was. This is how they need to use it. This is what you should do to inspect that they're doing it. And then
Right.
because it's a sales executive, it's a senior sales executive, right? It's a chief revenue officer or CSO, whatever.
Right.
It becomes a little bit of an executive coaching, help them do the messaging in a way that'll resonate
Yeah.
now that I know the personalities of these people. So that kind of thing. So it's very fulfilling for me to see them go out then and be the leader that their team needs.
Right. No, that's perfect. Um, what do you see? What are the top three things you see right now that the sales professional struggles with? If you're, what do they struggle with the most? I mean, the basic things. What do you think they struggle with right now?
So discovery,
Yeah.
to me, that's the key to everything, in terms of differentiation and winning a customer for life. So I think that's still one. And they struggle not because they don't necessarily know what to do, but when you're in the moment, it's very difficult when you are thinking like this to be able to go ask the right questions and make sure that the questions that you're asking are high impact and getting you to that emotion. So that's one. The second part goes hand in hand with that. It's the active listening.
Okay.
As sales professionals, we have a tendency, and I can say this because I struggle with this. I continue to struggle with this in my life, but I'm aware and I work with it.
Yeah.
When the customer is speaking, you have to be hanging on their every word. Our tendency is to listen to the first three words and be like, okay, I get it. This is what I'm going to say next, and start coming up with our statement. Well, now you just missed whatever gold was there for you to
Right.
take and then go create personalized value. So that's a big struggle and challenge. And I think that that's important, and we have to just train ourselves. I believe that's not something that's very innate in a lot of, and I'm making a generalization,
Right.
but a lot of us, because we are so high performing, high energy, getting ready to get through it. Listen, two things happen. One, you're going to learn more that you need to be able to differentiate yourself. And two, when you really listen, that customer feels like they're heard, and people love to talk about themselves, but more than that, they love to know that they were heard. And
Right.
if you can do that, you've already set yourself on a level that most didn't. So that's number two. And the number three is more to do with, as a sales professional, building your brand and
Okay.
being out there. And and you do, of course, you do an excellent job of this, but being out there on LinkedIn, for example, and sharing content, creating a voice for yourself and who you are and what you stand for, and sharing stories, sharing knowledge and insight that you have. You're a salesperson. You've worked with hundreds of customers, and you've got insight from each of those businesses. That insight that you have from one manufacturing company is utter gold for another manufacturing company. Obviously, you're not going to go in there and give them details, but
Right.
these are the types of challenges this industry faces. Well, you should be out there evangelizing that, because what happens now is that if you and boy, your LinkedIn profile better be up to speed, because I promise you, people that are meeting with you, customers, it's the first thing that they're looking at to see who you are. If I'm a customer, and this is getting better out there, but if I'm a customer and I
Right.
go look up the sales rep I'm about to have a meeting with, and I see 10-time President's Club winner, quota crusher, like, oh, goody, I'm about to be sold, right? Like, because that's what matters to that person. If that's what they're highlighting on their LinkedIn,
Right.
should be focused on helping my customers solve their problems, or focused on helping customers grow, blah, blah, blah. It has to be about them, even though it's
Right.
yours. If you want to be in the game of sales for the long term and connect at a human level, you better have a very human presence and a story.
Right. Yeah. Especially, I think you're right. I think there's almost a lot of sales professionals are a little scared to brand themselves
They are.
uh,
I don't
on
blame them. It's
LinkedIn or
not
Facebook
easy.
or wherever, but
Yeah,
and kind of, because that does differentiate you. I do think that differentiates you. Like you said, they're going to
that's
look at your LinkedIn profile, and if it's all about
every time.
you know, your
Yeah,
awards,
how much
then
money you've made, which
yeah,
which
yeah,
a recruiter would appreciate that, right? Like back in the day, I think initially years ago when LinkedIn started, it was truly for recruiters, right? It was much more, let me put my profile up there so that people can find me when I'm looking for a job. That
right,
is completely transformed. There's a little of that, but even recruiters now are not looking for people that are saying things about how many times they went to President's Club. They're looking for people that truly understand how to engage a customer, because the people that are paying the recruiters are looking for that too. So
yeah,
we've come a long way in that regard. So there's no excuse to not update
yeah.
that at this point. So those are
No,
the
I
three
agree.
things I think are continue to be a struggle.
Awesome. Um, I got one more question for you. It's one last question, but before we do that, I want you
Yeah.
to tell everybody how they can get in touch with Anita Nielsen.
Oh, yeah.
Go get this book, but tell them how they can get in touch with you, where they can reach you at,
Yes.
and so
Yeah.
that they can get this sales enablement expert help.
Yeah, no, that sounds wonderful. So the book Beat the Bots is on Amazon. If you type in Beat the Bots, I think it's like the second thing that if you don't correct it to Beat the Boys, which is absolutely not what I wrote,
Yeah.
Beat the Bots, it'll pop right up. So it's on Amazon. And then my Twitter handle is A Nielsen. It's at A Nielsen LDK. And I'm most active though on LinkedIn. So when you pull up Anita Nielsen, I'll be one of the first ones that pop up, and you might say like Anita Nielsen author or something. But
Okay.
connect with me. I mean, I'm always open to connections. Let me know that you heard the podcast and what you found interesting. And then that way,
Yep.
I'm actually making a real connection, and I can keep an eye out for the things that are interesting to you. But yeah, I'm out there, and this is what I do. I live to serve sales leaders and salespeople. So happy to connect.
And here's what I'm going to do for the listeners. Once the podcast comes out, once we release this episode, I'm going to have a little, not a contest, but haven't figured out how I'm going to structure it yet. But the first person to email me or do something on LinkedIn, I'm going to send them a copy of your book. It's going to be on the Sales Vitamin. We're going to do it. We're going to send it to them,
Oh,
and
I love it.
they'll enjoy it. Last question for you. So you've got one vitamin to give. What's that one vitamin? What's that one sales vitamin you're going to give that sales profession, that guy or that gal that, hey, I've only got one vitamin to give you to help you
So
increase
hard.
your sales performance. Here it is.
This is so hard. Just one thing. Okay. Well, there's two that are competing, but I will give you the one
Okay.
that I think is most actionable at this moment. Get darn good at discovery. Become a master of high impact questions that elicit the emotion from your customers, because that is the information that is going to get you differentiated. You have to get to that level. So become a master of discovery and high impact questions.
Discovery. You heard it. You heard it here on the sales vitamin. So that's your one thing today that you've got to go do. And then next week when you're out, make sure you're great at discovery. I agree 100%. It has been so good to
Yes,
have
thank
you,
you.
and you're going to be one of the first episodes. I'm excited. I love the
I
book.
love that. Thank
Book's
you.
extremely practical. So everybody run out and get this book. And I believe it's LDK Advisory, right? That's the name of
Yeah,
the
LDK
company.
Advisory
Okay.
Services. Yep.
All right, great. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for
You.
being on today. I'm honored to have you. I know your time's valuable, so I appreciate
Thank
that.
you. No, I appreciate being here. Thanks for the invite. And all you listeners, sign up, subscribe. I mean, I can already tell you this is going to be something you're going to want to listen to on a regular basis.
That's right. Hey, have a great afternoon, and until the next sales vitamin, thank you.
Thank you. Take care.